So, we are here with Edward Cowie, composer who lives in England, famous composer who, yes, hi, good morning, Edward. Actually, good afternoon, Edward. It's morning in the
It's
West
good
Coast.
evening, but it's good
It's good
evening, but
evening.
never mind. Nice to be here.
Nice to be there. Yeah. So, Edward, you were very kind in writing a piece for the Seattle Chamber Orchestra, and we are very thrilled to be premiering this piece on February 17th at St. Andrew's Church in Seattle, 8 p.m. for the folks who want to attend. I strongly recommend it. It's a great piece. And so, just to give the audience and whoever is going to watch this video a little bit of a background, you were. Some newspaper referred to you, some important newspaper referred to you as the best composer, best living composer whose music is inspired by nature. So, and your piece is definitely inspired by nature, is inspired by the orca whales and the community of the orca whales that live in the waters around Seattle. So, how did you come up with this idea?
Well, the answer will have to be quite short because time is time. It's always a long story, but I mean, the whole interaction between myself and nature, as it probably did for most of you who are going to see me right now and who are going to go to the concert, started in my childhood. It started before I could read music, and certainly before I could write music, which is that I knew that sound, natural sound, had got beautiful shapes, and that these shapes went across from static things like trees which don't move much to the movement of water in a stream, the patterns of the bark on a tree, the patterns of shifting and changing clouds, and of course, in this particular case, the patterns made by swimming mammals, i.e., killer whales, in the ocean. This to be described as the greatest living composer inspired by the natural world isn't necessarily quite flattering. I wish there were more composers who would. I mean, I think it's a very short race track, or rather, racing members who actually are directly inspired by the natural world. It's increasing, I think, more and more. But yes, I think I've described, if you like, music as a sort of natural phenomenon in its own right. We humans love patterns, we love sound, and we are very aware, or we should be, that natural sound is both something that sustains and nourishes us, but also potentially can threaten us. Our awareness, our need to be aware of natural sound, isn't just because we love the sound of a nightingale or a cardinal singing, or even the songs of killer whales. But that, I mean, for example, if I were a seal, I wouldn't be particularly interested in the sound of killer whale's song because it's bad news. They could eat me tomorrow. But the piece is born. This piece is born of an ongoing love affair
Mhm.
between two things: my love of the sounds of nature and my love of the sounds that instruments can make when they are attached to, or derived from, or married to, or having a relationship with natural sound. Um, I have described my music as evocative. The one thing I want this piece to do for your listeners is to take them to a sense of place,
Okay.
but not just to a sense of place, but a place for their senses. I think they will be able to see some of the drawings that I've done when I first had a real live relationship with killer whales. I hope that they will realize my music is essentially not just acoustic, it's also visual.
Mhm.
I would love it if at some point during the actual performance they can close their eyes and develop their own scenography, to have their own areas of water, their own turbulences, their own emergence of these extraordinary black and white creatures, menacing as they might seem, quite beautiful, the way they break the surface and they weave these wonderful patterns, let alone the sounds of their wonderful glissandos underneath the surface of the water. So that that's very important. I think also I would say to your listeners, I don't know if they're or your watchers, if they're going to see this before the concert, but they can, if they want to, go to YouTube and hear me talking about where my music comes from in a series of films called Edward Cowie in Conversation. I would recommend them, particularly if you like films 3 and 4 in the series, which will give a much more vivid picture of why I do what I do, and above all, how I do what I do.
Yeah. Okay. You kind of stole my next question, which was about the fact that you draw before and you paint as well. So you live in this very visual world, and before you start writing a piece, you actually put down the notes on a staff. You actually draw something, which is the maybe
yeah. Well,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, I have more than one sketchbook, and I take these with me en plein air. In other words, in the field. I'm one of these people who doesn't take a camera or a tape recorder. I take an instrument upon which I can write. In other words, paper and a pencil, and I make drawings, quite realistic if they have to be or if they are. But I don't just draw the movement of, say, a whale. I draw the turbulences of the water, the inflections of color in the cloudscape. So I have colored pencils as well. I will write words if they help me in a mnemonic or memorable way to vivify or give greater insight into what I'm seeing. And I also, where appropriate, will make musical notations. In other words, I'll literally write down the songs at pitch. I certainly wrote down the songs of Killer Whales at pitch. But yes, what I call drawing towards music, and one of those conversation films on YouTube is called Drawing Towards Music, the fourth one, makes it very clear that I'm a person who believes in getting closer, bigger, richer, by using all my senses, but most particularly to see and to hear. That whole idea of, I'm not synesthetic. I don't believe that visual things have absolute sonic counterparts or vice versa. I don't think A major is red. I believe very much that the shapes of things that we can see and the sense of those shapes are similar to the shapes and senses of things that we can hear. And it's that quality. I mean, I think you're going to film this performance, I think you were saying.
Of course, yeah.
I urge the audience to watch the movements of the players.
Okay.
Because in a strange way, a double bass and a cello are not so far removed from the body of a killer whale.
Okay.
Just think of that. It has a head and it has a tail. Indeed, the violins and violas and cellos and basses have a nose and they have a tail. And when the bow is moving across the strings, it's doing what a wave does in the bay at Seattle. And indeed, the rocking of the bow is the movement of waves. The movement of the bow itself is the movement of the fish. And of course, your players, as will you, the conductor, make physical movements, which will, in some sense, some beautiful sense, replicate some of the movements which are being made by the whales in the water, in the sea around Seattle.
Quick question. So in the program, because I'm the music director of the SCO, I decided to include music that I think it's standing far apart. So Baroque with Johann Sebastian Bach and minimalism. And I think as far as Baroque, I chose Johann Sebastian Bach, and minimalism will be Philip Glass and Henryk Górecki, which also they do stand kind of far apart in my opinion, although they use very simple or simpler movements of music. Would you say that you stand in a category, or it's better not to assign any stylistic label to anybody? But would you say you are a Baroque composer living in the 21st century?
No. I believe very deeply. It's been a continuous and ongoing quest in me that I have the mind of a child. And a child mind is the one which is most curious. I think the one thing that makes me not look my age and my music not sound like a person written by a person who's rapidly getting into his ninth decade is that I refuse to be influenced by style. Yeah. I am more affected by idea. And I think that I am unique as a composer, probably in my intersensuality, by using the visual and the sonic. Yes, there are shadows of the Baroque. There are probably even elements of minimalism in my music. There are certainly direct relationships and connections with the classical period, the Romantic period, the Renaissance period, the Baroque period, the contemporary period, as there are also relationships between tonality and dissonance, or between even serialism and other kinds of modes. But those are only the consequences of a collective mind, a mind which says, I'm me. I want to write music which comes directly from my experience. And whilst I have admiration for Philip Glass or Goretzky or Bach, I don't want to imitate them. I live to share, I hope, an original experience, an original sensation in an original way. Gustav Mahler had a very ambivalent relationship both with friends and audiences and players when he was alive. It was apparently an incredible tragedy that after the premiere of his first symphony, even some of his friends walked on the other side of the street rather than speaking to him. One of the things a composer loves is feedback. Now, I've got a website which has an email connection. I would love any member of your audience to send me a message saying, Edward, I thought that was absolutely horrendous. Or, Edward,
I don't think that's going to happen.
Edward, you got me. You took me somewhere. As you know, I'm hoping that somehow, not too far in the future, I will be able to come to Seattle. Yes. We'll talk about that in a little while, but I would love to come to there and experience not only the landscape and the seascapes of Seattle, but some of the people. But yes, please, feedback.
On behalf of SCO, the Seattle Chamber Orchestra, I want to thank you so much for writing this commission and for being so generous to the organization, to this new organization. And we hope to, collaborate in the future, maybe with a bigger ensemble, with a bigger, piece, and inspired by some other natural, things of the.
I have an idea which I will share with you in a moment.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Edward. It's been great talking to you.